Hi, hello, I'm Casey Wagner, and my question is, where will the boundary be between human and machine in the future? Now, to understand the relevance of this question, you really have to look at the three perspectives that it affords. The first being, you can get a sense of where our culture as a whole is headed. You also get an idea of what the next step in human evolution is, in the state that I don't think anyone can argue that computers have had a huge effect on us as humans, and that will really play a big part in where we go as a species. And finally, we get a good idea of how we can respond to this and prepare ourselves as people and as a culture for what we're facing in the future. To fully understand where we're going to go in the future, you really have to look at the present day and fully understand what's going on now and where it's headed. And already we're living with heavy reliance on machines and robots in our lives, whether it be your phone or your computer or people with pacemakers, things like that. Our lives are heavily reliant on them already, and this is all technology that 50 and 100 years ago was very scary to people and would seem super futuristic. So it seems to point towards the adaptability of humans and how fast we can get used to new technology. So stuff that may seem weird or scary now, we're going to be used to very quickly. The stimulus material, The World Without Work by Derek Thompson, paints a good picture for how our job market currently is reacting to robot integration. And the job market will be the first place to see robot integration just due to the fact that there's a lot more money involved than any other field. It kind of paints a post-apocalyptic scenario of a world without work and without jobs for any man. But it seems that when you actually look at the evidence it provides, it would point to a different conclusion in the sense that it is almost leading up to augmented humans, in the sense that it would require humans who have been changed to work better in the workplace with robots, whether that be prosthetics that could help people lift more or computer chips in the brain to help you think faster. Advancements like this are very much nearer than you would think, and that seems to be the logical conclusion to where humans would go. Also, this whole scenario is very reminiscent of what happened in World War II, and in a visual perspective with the Rosie the Riveter poster, in the sense that in World War II an entire generation of workers was forced away from their jobs and a new group had to step up. At the time it was women, but in the future it could be a new group of augmented humans who could take these jobs. As far as scientific goes, robots are already being built to become more human-like, with robots being built to beat the Turing test, a test built in the 40s where a human anonymously talks to a human and another robot, or human and a robot, and they try and guess which is which without seeing them. Already we're getting very close to beating this, which is an old world style of figuring out when robots have surpassed humans. In the medical field, research has really turned towards cyberization, with much more integration with computers in our bodies and our brains, in every aspect to help us live longer and to get rid of diseases. And already researchers are being faced with their job descriptions being changed from scientists to philosophers, with having to discuss whether or not someone is still human after so much augmentation. In order to fully understand how we've gotten to our present day, you really have to look at our cultural heritage. And in the West, our relationship with robots has kind of been a controversial one, in the sense that we've always shown them as evil. We've always shown them as tools, and they're always missing something central to being human. You can see this all the way back in the 50s with the pulp movies, as with that poster there, all the way to today with movies like I, Robot and The Matrix. They always seem to be the villains of media, which is in direct contrast with the Eastern European and Asian perspective, where their culture since ancient history has been very positive view on machines and automata and homunculi, and things like their religions and their plays and things like that. It's always been kind of a part of their culture. So that's affected today in how they view like modern day robots. And that's best encapsulated by the 1995 Japanese animated film Ghost in the Shell, which is a retelling of the book by Arthur Koesteller, Ghost in the Machine. And it's basically a story about a woman whose only human part left is part of her brain inside a robotic body. And she comes into contact with a sentient AI. And it's kind of just discussing the ideas of what makes us human, and if a computer is completely sentient and can think for itself, what's the difference between that and a human brain? It takes an anti-dualistic viewpoint, meaning it doesn't think that there's a difference between the soul, brain, and body. It's all one kind of machine. It's kind of a very cynical and scientific viewpoint on it, and it doesn't reference things like religious views or things like that. And just as in the movie, soon in our scientific community, we're going to be faced with something called the robotic singularity, which is essentially when robots continue to gain human traits up until the point where they're interchangeable with humans. Because as humans, we're just going to be continued to be augmented in small ways over time, and it'll build up. And most likely we're going to reach a point where there isn't going to be much of a physical difference between us and the robots we're creating. A lot of scientists view this as kind of the end of the world scenario of when robots can take us over. It's the subject of many novels, including the novel that became Blade Runner is almost directly referencing this. And it's generally a point of contention as to where the human race will go from it. Now, a central point to understand when discussing this is to understand how close scientists have been already to connecting the computer with, connecting your brain with a computer, and how computer-like our brain already is. Already we found that information and memories are transferred amongst our brain the same way signals are sent in a computer. And that leads to the general scientific consensus based off a 2013 University of Washington study, in which it's said that consciousness will be able to be uploaded to a computer within 30 years of now. Now, once we reach this point of being so augmented and robots being so human-like we can't tell a difference between each other, the only real difference will be the hypothetical idea of who has a soul or not. Now, this is completely based down to religious views, and that's based on the person because that can't be backed up with science. So if you're looking at it just from a scientific perspective, it seems to point to the conclusion that AI mixed with humans and cyberization is actually the next step in our evolution. And that's my presentation.
Thank you. I have two questions for you. First question, what evidence did you gather that you didn't use, and why did you choose not to use it?
I got a lot more information on the cultural perspective because that was the one that personally interested me to research it. Specifically, much more information on the Eastern European and like Slavic countries and their history with like machines. And I chose to take it out due to it not necessarily adding much for the amount of time it would take to explain it.
Thank you. And last, what advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic?
I would advise you to start with researching the philosophy behind it before going into the like modern day how we get there, because especially when it becomes such a morally gray area about what makes us human, it's all based on our philosophy. So I think having a good ground in that is really what helps you understand the bigger picture.